All right, let's just jump right in. What if I told you that one of the most famous heroines in all of literature was actually created by an author whose secret mission was to, well, to kill the entire romance genre? Seriously, back in 1856, Gustave Flaubert gave us a character so obsessed with her own fantasies, she became a walking, talking warning sign. Her story was so potent, so toxic, that it basically functioned as an anti-romance for a whole generation. We're talking, of course, about Emma Bovary. And this, right here, really gets to the heart of the whole thing. You've got the split, right? On one side, there's the myth. The one we've all kind of been sold, especially in the movies. This ethereal, passionate heroine trapped by her circumstances, a victim. But then there's the reality, the one Flaubert actually put on the page. And that's a whole different story. It's about a woman who is just completely suffocated by her own ambition, her boredom, and a mountain of debt.
So first, let's talk about that myth, because let's be honest, it's the version that's way easier to swallow. And it mostly comes from how we've seen her story on the big screen. I mean, if you've seen the Mia Wasikowska adaptation, you know what I'm talking about. It's gorgeous, right? The costumes, the scenery, it's all breathtaking. And in versions like that, Emma gets this very ethereal, almost delicate quality. The whole story tends to focus on her suffering, painting her as this really sympathetic victim who's just stuck in a boring town. But here's the thing, by sanding down all her rough edges, these movies completely miss what's really driving her. This fierce, complicated, and deeply flawed ambition. Okay, so that's the myth. Now for Flaubert's brutal reality. His book is basically a systematic takedown of that whole romantic ideal. He did it with this revolutionary new style of realism, a style so different that critics at the time actually called it badly written. Can you believe that? And why? Because he was breaking all the rules to get at something much deeper, a kind of raw psychological truth.
So where does it all go wrong for Emma? It starts with her dreams. She just devours these romance novels, right? And they fuel this deep, deep yearning for a life that, well, it doesn't really exist. It's this fuzzy idea of dazzling balls and intense passion and being part of this Parisian high society. It's a total fantasy. But in her head, it's her destiny.
And this is where we really see Flaubert's method in action. Just when Emma is totally lost in one of her daydreams, Flaubert just yanks us back. He yanks her back, too, back to the most boring, mundane details of her life. The sound of a cracked bell, the dust blowing up from the road. People call this technique a literary rack focus. It's like in a movie when the camera shifts focus from the background to the foreground. He's constantly pulling our attention away from her grand inner world and shoving the gritty, boring reality of her life right in our faces. And her biggest disappointments? Of course, it's her marriage. She's fantasizing about this world of refined, elegant love. But she's married to Charles, and Charles is, well, he's a good guy. He's kind, he's decent, but he is just so painfully dull. He's a country doctor, and to Emma, he's the living, breathing embodiment of everything mediocre she wants to escape. There's just no way the poor guy can live up to the fantasy heroes in her novels. And here he does it again, that classic rack focus. You have Emma just lying there, totally paralyzed by her own misery. But does Flaubert describe her feelings? Nope. Instead, he forces us to look where she's looking, at the peeling scales on the walls, at a long-legged spider crawling in a crack in a beam above her head. And these details, they're not random. It's brilliant, really. They're a visual symbol of her own psychological decay. It's like her soul is crumbling and the room is just reflecting it back at her. So, the really crucial thing to get here is that Flaubert's genius wasn't just what he wrote about, but how he wrote it. I mean, he was using these literary techniques that were decades ahead of their time. And what's wild is that when you look at them closely, they feel almost cinematic, like something a director would do today. His main secret weapon was something called free, indirect style. Now, that sounds academic, but it's actually pretty cool. It's a way for a third-person narrator to just glide right into a character's thoughts and feelings, all without having to say, Emma thought or Emma felt. The line between the narrator and Emma just blurs. And the effect is this incredible psychological closeness. You start to feel her desires and her delusions almost like they're your own. And this is where it gets really mind-blowing. Look at how Flaubert's 19th century literary moves map directly onto modern video strategies. That rack focus we talked about, that's just like in a docudrama when the camera shifts perspective from the victim to the perpetrator. His use of montage, like in that famous scene at the agricultural fair where he's cutting back and forth between a sappy romantic seduction and a politician's droning speech, that's basically the ancestor of the quick, ironic cuts you see all over the internet. And his use of props to symbolize emotions, that's a filmmaker doing a close-up on a key piece of evidence. The guy was literally editing with words 100 years before film was even a thing.
And yeah, just like a great director, Flaubert was a master of using props. I mean, these objects in the book, they're not just background dressing. No way. They are absolutely loaded with meaning. You have Charles's ridiculous cap at the very beginning. It tells you everything about his character in one single image. Or the Silt cigar case Emma finds, which becomes this huge symbol of the glamorous world she's dying to be a part of. Every single one is like a cinematic close-up, a clue that reveals someone's true feelings or marks another step down in Emma's spiral.
So you have to wonder, right? What happens when someone who lives completely inside their own head, in a total fantasy world, finally crashes headfirst into cold, hard reality? Well, Flaubert shows us, and he shows us in excruciating, unforgettable detail. And her downfall, it's tragic for sure, but it also feels completely inevitable. You can just trace the steps. It really kicks off after she goes to this dazzling ball, which gives her a real taste of the high life and makes her actual life feel just unbearable. So what does she do? She seeks escape in affairs, first with a young romantic guy named Leon, and then with a cynical, wealthy landowner named Rudolph. And to keep up the illusion, to build this fantasy life for herself, she starts spending like crazy, burying herself in debt. Of course, when it all comes crashing down and she desperately needs help, her lovers abandon her, leaving her completely, utterly alone. In total desperation, she ends up sneaking into the local pharmacy and just eats a fistful of arsenic. And this is the final, brutal nail in the coffin for all of her romantic delusions. There is no beautiful, poetic death scene here, not even close. Flaubert describes her death by poisoning in graphic, cold, clinical detail. It's painful, it's grotesque, and it's so unglamorous. It is the ultimate rejection of the very fantasies she chased her whole life. But the story doesn't just end with her death. No, the most fascinating part, the biggest twist in the entire saga, actually comes from the man who wrote it all, Gustave Flaubert himself. So here's the paradox. Flaubert was famous for the letters he wrote. And if you read them, you'll see he was constantly complaining about the characters he was creating. He called them vulgar, provincial, mediocre. He went on and on about how much he disliked Emma in particular, which makes what he finally admitted absolutely mind-blowing. He's famously quoted as saying, "Madame Bovary, c'est moi." Madame Bovary is me. Just let that sink in. In this one unbelievable confession, Flaubert lays out the ultimate paradox. The author who claimed to despise his own creation, who built her up just to tear down the entire idea of romanticism, was also saying he saw himself in her. He understood her boredom. He understood that desperate, aching desire for a life that was bigger, more beautiful, more intense than the one he was actually living. And that leaves us, the readers, with the same question that's been debated for more than 150 years. So what do you think? Was she a villain, totally corrupted by her selfish desires? Or was she actually a victim of a society that gave a woman with her kind of ambition and imagination absolutely nowhere to go? Flaubert never gives us an easy answer. And that, right there, is exactly why his great anti-romance is still one of the most haunting and powerful novels you will ever read.